Greetings. In this video, I'd like to talk about asynchronous modals with Expo Router. I've written an article about it, so what I would like to do in this video is just to do a basic demonstration of the application and a walkthrough of the code, since I doubt that anyone would want to watch me live code this, and seeing that it would take quite a bit of time. So I'll just start by explaining a bit of what asynchronous modals are about. It's basically using promises to invoke modals and get back their values. So traditionally, the way that you would work with a modal with Expo Router is that you would define the router in your stack, and then you'd push it onto the stack, and then if you want to return a value, you would need to pass it as params. But that would be a bit cumbersome, and if you want to do something simple like selecting a date, you don't really want to go through all the plumbing that it would take to track all these values across the application. But if you could have a system where you just call a function, pass it some parameters, and then you await its return value, that would create a more streamlined process, and it would just make your application easier to reason about, easier to maintain, and overall a bit more pleasant to work with. And in this article, I detail a way that you can implement this. Okay, so what I'll do is just do a run through of the application first. I already have it running locally. Okay, so when you press this button, this is the modal that appears, and you enter some text. And when you resolve the modal, it shows you the return value. This is a responses test. And if you close it, it rejects the promise, and it tells you that. Okay, so that is basically it for the functionality in terms of the user-facing part of it. But what you're concerned about is the implementation, and we'll have a look at that now. Okay, so I'll start by looking at the main screen. Okay, so it seems like we have an issue here. Let's have a look at how this is defined. It seems I may need to or maybe not. Okay, so this looks like we're good to go. Okay, so we have our home screen defined here. We have the theme view, which is provided by Expo, and a button to show the modal. When the button is pressed, it calls the show modal function, and it accepts a type parameter, which determines or which provides a hint of the type that is returned by the modal. So our modal returns a string, which is the input that is entered. And when it returns, we just show an alert with the value. And if the promise is rejected, then we display an alert with the message that is provided. So that is basically everything from this side of the equation. But let's have a look at the modal itself. In the modal screen, one of something that you might find strange here is the params that are used. So as you can see, it accepts a modal ID parameter, and this is passed. Well, as you will see a bit later, this is passed from the show modal function. So we need to retrieve it to track the modal that is being displayed. Okay, so when the resolve button is clicked, we call the resolve modal function with the modal ID parameter with the value that we're returning. And if close is tapped, then we dismiss the modal from the router and we reject the promise. And something else to take into consideration is that depending on how the modal is presented, it may be possible to dismiss it without the application being aware of it or the promise handling code being aware of it. And in such a scenario, the promise would not be resolved or rejected, and that might cause memory leaks or other problems. So what this does is that it allows us to reject the promise as a last resort. And this scenario might happen, for instance, if the application is running on iOS, where you can swipe down to dismiss the modal, or on Android, if you are showing the modal header and the back button is available. And it can also happen if you use the device's back button as well. Okay, so that is basically it from the calling side of the equation, but the more interesting part of it is within the implementation of these functions. And we'll find them in the modal context, file. Okay, so we start by defining various types and functions. So we're using a random string as the modal ID. And we also define the resolvers, which will contain our promises or our promise resolvers and the reject function. And we also define the type of the value that the context contains. It contains these three functions. The showModal function, it accepts the type parameter and the path of the modal, and it returns a promise of the type parameter. And the resolve modal function, it accepts the modal ID and the value that is that's been returned. I think we'll need to enter the type as well. And finally, the reject modal function, which accepts the modal ID and a reason explaining what happened. So that will manifest in the form of the error message when you, in the catch block of a try except thing, or a try catch block. Okay, we also have a utility use modal hook, which just returns the value of the context. And we have a provider. And in that provider, we have a resolvers reference, which contains a map of string to resolvers. And when show modal is called, we generate the modal ID, and we push the path of the modal onto the stack and pass the modal ID as a param. And then we return a promise and capture or store references to the resolve and reject functions. And in the resolve modal function, we retrieve a reference to the resolver corresponding to the modal ID. If it's available, we call the resolve function, and then we delete it, and we return to the previous screen on the stack. And for the reject modal function, same thing, we can get the resolver, we call the reject function and delete the resolver corresponding to the current modal ID, and we go back if it's possible to go back. And then we pass these functions to the provider, and in the layout, we have the modal provider setup, and that wires everything. And that is basically all there is to it. So I think it's a very useful pattern for working with modals, very convenient. And what I like about using modals with Expo Router in particular is that it's very flexible. If you use something like a transparent modal, that would allow you to design the modal to work in a way that you want. So you can have it styled as a traditional modal, which is displayed at the center of the screen, or you can have it displayed at the bottom of the screen like a bottom sheet, and it's just very nice. It's a very nice pattern to use. So I hope that you find this video useful and you find the pattern useful as well.